The council chamber was silent. The kind of silence that wasn't just the absence of noise, it was heavy, pressing, full of unspoken fear. The gathered alien leaders sat in a perfect ring, their faces grim, their eyes avoiding one another. A holographic display hovered in the center of the chamber, showing a simple line of text. Under no circumstances shall humanity be allowed to engage in galactic war. It was an old law. One of the oldest in the Galactic Accord. And yet, tonight, it was being questioned. Kala, a young diplomat from the Zeltri species, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His people were warriors, known for their battle prowess, yet even they had followed the ancient law without question. Until now. I do not understand, Kala finally said, his voice breaking the stillness. The humans are small. Their technology is not the most advanced. Physically, they are weaker than many species in this chamber. So why is this law absolute? Why do we forbid them from war? An elder from the Zyphron Dominion, his insectoid features unreadable, gave a sharp chitter. You are young. You were not there. You have only heard stories. Then tell me the truth, Kala pressed. Not stories. Not myths. The truth. A deep sigh came from the far side of the chamber. The oldest being in the room, Grand Marshal Oshen of the Mhalari, leaned forward. His glowing blue eyes held something no one had ever seen in a Mhalari before, something that made even the war-hardened among them uneasy. Fear. You wish to know why humans are banned from war? Oshen said quietly. Kala nodded. Oshen exhaled, then spoke the words that had haunted the galaxy for centuries. Because we survived it. The room grew colder. No one spoke. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Oshen continued. The Great War of the Orion Rift. The war to end all wars, they called it. 5 of the strongest galactic empires, countless fleets, endless firepower. We believed ourselves invincible. And then, the humans were forced into it. His gaze met Kala's. And we learned what true war was. Kala frowned. They lost? Oshen shook his head. No, his voice was barely above a whisper now. We did. A shudder rippled through the room. The walls themselves seemed to shrink, as if recoiling from the memory. Kala felt the tension tighten around him, yet his curiosity would not let him stop. What did they do? He asked. Oshen closed his eyes. They changed everything. He leaned forward, his voice grim. And if you want to know why humans are banned from war, then listen carefully. For once you hear this story, you will never look at them the same way again. The chamber's silence deepened as Oshen leaned back in his seat, his glowing eyes dim. We believed we understood war, he began. Every species did. We had fought for millennia, shaping battlefields with grand strategies, deploying massive fleets, calculating every move with precision. We thought war was an equation, firepower, resources, numbers. He let out a bitter chuckle. But then, we made a mistake. We dragged humanity into it. Kala listened intently, feeling the weight of history pressing down on him. The war began as all wars do, with greed, Oshen continued. 5 of the great galactic empires sought to control the Orion Rift, a region rich in resources and strategic positioning. The fighting escalated, drawing in more and more factions, until the galaxy itself was divided. The war raged on for decades, and yet, the humans remained uninvolved. Why? Kala asked. They were not a major power, Oshen replied. They had colonies, trade routes, but no grand fleets. No empires to defend. And so, they stayed out of it. He sighed. Until the Gamari Empire, in their arrogance, made the worst decision in galactic history. Kala leaned forward. They attacked a human colony, Oshen said grimly. A small settlement on the edge of known space. It had no military presence. Just civilians, farmers, scientists, traders. Kala felt his stomach twist. And? The humans begged the Gamari to stop. Sent transmissions. Offered everything they had to avoid conflict. But the Gamari saw their weakness as an opportunity. They obliterated the colony. Left nothing but ash. A ripple of unease passed through the council. Kala frowned. But surely, they had done the same to others before. They had, Oshen admitted. Dozens of times. And their enemies had always responded in the same way, mourning, surrender, or at best, measured retaliation. His gaze darkened. But humanity did something else. Kala's pulse quickened. What? They did not mourn. They did not surrender. Oshen's voice was quiet, but every word carried weight. They changed. He tapped the table lightly, bringing up a new hologram. It displayed grainy, old footage of a Gamari war fleet, sleek, powerful, brimming with weapons, arriving at another human colony, expecting an easy conquest. What you are about to see, Oshen warned, is the moment the galaxy learned to fear humanity. The footage played. The Gamari fleet moved in, their ships bristling with energy weapons, their commanders confident. Then, without warning, a single human vessel appeared. Small. Unimpressive. But something was wrong. The Gamari ships hesitated. Their captains issued frantic orders. The battle formation fell apart. Then, static. The transmission ended. Kala stared at the screen, confused. What happened? Oshen's voice was grim. No one knows. He paused, then whispered, because none of the Gamari ships were ever seen again. Kala's mandibles twitched, his species equivalent of a shiver. What do you mean they were never seen again? Oshen's expression darkened. Exactly what I said. The entire Gamari fleet, hundreds of warships, some of the most advanced in the galaxy, vanished. But, how? Kala pressed. Surely there was wreckage, survivors, black box data? Oshen shook his head. Nothing. No distress signals. No debris fields. No evidence of battle. He let out a slow breath. It was as if the fleet had ceased to exist. The council chamber was thick with tension, the weight of the story pressing down on everyone. The Gamari command panicked, Oshen continued. They sent scouts. Probes. None returned. The few long-range scans they managed to retrieve were strange. He gestured, and another holographic feed flickered into view. The council watched as a grainy scan showed a distant star system, the site of the human colony. The Gamari ships were there, surrounding the planet. Then, static washed over the screen. When it cleared, the ships were gone. Completely. No sign of battle. No explosions. Just, gone. They thought it was a sensor error, Oshen said. Until the next fleet disappeared. Kala stiffened. They sent another? They had to, Oshen said. The Gamari Empire could not afford to show weakness. They sent another fleet, twice as large, better armed, with orders to not engage but only observe and report. Oshen's fingers danced across the console, bringing up another data stream. The footage showed the second fleet approaching the system. Ships in perfect formation. Then, the static returned. But this time it flickered, briefly revealing something before cutting out completely. Kala squinted at the frozen image on the screen. His eyes widened. It was the human vessel. But it was different now. The ship's surface was shifting. It no longer looked like a standard human craft. It was larger, darker, its hull seemingly absorbing light. There was no visible weaponry, no thrusters, no energy readings. And yet, the fleet vanished all the same. The chamber was silent. What did humans do? Kala whispered. Oshen exhaled. They didn't just fight the Gamari. He leaned forward. They studied them. Kala's pulse quickened. Studied? Oshen nodded. While other species waged war through brute force, humans adapted. They learned how their enemy thought, how they communicated, how they reacted under pressure. His eyes locked onto Kala's. And then, they used that knowledge against them. Kala felt a chill run down his spine. But what kind of weapon can make entire fleets disappear? Oshen hesitated before answering. It wasn't a weapon, he said softly. It was worse. The room tensed. What did they do? Kala asked again, his voice barely above a whisper. Oshen's gaze turned grim. They made the Gamari doubt their own reality. Kala's breathing grew shallow. Doubt their own reality? He shook his head. That's impossible. No weapon, no technology can do that. Oshen's gaze didn't waver. You still think of war as firepower and destruction. But that is not how humans fight. He leaned forward, his voice low and steady. They don't just break their enemies. They break their minds. The council chamber seemed to grow colder. Oshen activated another holographic projection, this time an intercepted Gamari transmission. It was old, its data corrupted by time, but the voice that played sent shivers through the room. Not real. Not real. Not real. We were wrong. It sees us. It sees through us. I don't know where I am anymore. This isn't my ship. This isn't my body. I don't remember my own name, a chittering gasp came from one of the younger diplomats. The voice on the recording continued, now reduced to a trembling whisper. We thought they were prey. We thought they were weak. But they don't fight like us. They fight with things we don't understand. And now I can't tell if I'm awake or dreaming. I think I've been dead this whole time. Or maybe I never existed at all, a shrill scream cut through the transmission. Then silence. The recording ended. Kala swallowed hard. What did the humans do to them? Oshen deactivated the hologram. We never found out for certain. But the Gamari who went up against them either disappeared or came back changed. Changed? Those who returned were no longer warriors. They were broken. Some refused to speak. Some tore at their own flesh, as if they believed they were someone, or something, else. And some simply stopped responding to anything at all. Oshen's fingers tightened into a fist. They did not need weapons. They became the weapon. Kala felt a rising unease. How? How could humans do something like this? Oshen's expression darkened. Because humans don't just fight with technology. They fight with ideas. They don't conquer with brute force, they dismantle their enemy's very understanding of the world. He paused. And once you no longer trust what's real, the battle is already lost. The council chamber remained frozen, each leader lost in thought. The Gamari finally understood, Oshen continued. It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about numbers. It was about something far worse. He exhaled slowly, looking around at the assembled diplomats. Their war doctrine was built on logic, discipline, and structure. And the humans shattered all of it with chaos, deception, and something none of us knew how to fight against. Kala hesitated. What was that? Oshen's eyes locked onto his. Doubt. A cold shiver ran through Kala. The moment you question your own thoughts, Oshen whispered, you have already lost the war. The room was deathly silent. No one moved. No one spoke. And for the first time in his life, Kala felt something terrifying crawl into his chest. The fear of knowing that the only reason they were still alive was because the humans had chosen to let them be. Kala sat frozen in his chair, the weight of Oshen's words pressing down on him like a crushing force. His mind reeled at the implications. War was supposed to be about fleets, firepower, and strategic positioning. How could an entire empire collapse because of doubt? The chamber remained deathly silent, the other council members too afraid to speak. Finally, Kala found his voice. You're telling me, humans destroyed the Gamari fleet without firing a single shot? Oshen nodded slowly. At first, yes. Kala's mandibles tightened. At first? Oshen's expression darkened. The Gamari were stubborn. They refused to believe what was happening. After their second fleet disappeared, they assembled the largest armada in their history. Thousands of ships. Their greatest tacticians. Their most advanced technology. His fingers tapped the console, and another hologram flickered to life, a vast armada, stretching across the void like an endless storm. The Gamari had prepared for total war. This time, Oshen continued, they did not approach blindly. They sent forward ships without crew, fully automated, with no biological minds to manipulate. Kala exhaled. And? The ships reached the system. They transmitted data. Everything appeared normal. For once, it seemed the humans had no tricks left to play. A pause. Then the machine stopped responding. A ripple of tension passed through the council. Oshen played another intercepted transmission, Gamari commanders shouting, trying to regain control of their vessels. Impossible. The firewalls were unbreakable. They've overridden our systems, our own ships are turning against us. They're feeding false data. I can't tell what's real and what's a simulation. The voices grew frantic, dissolving into chaos. The final words of the transmission were a single phrase, repeated over and over again in a trembling whisper. They are already inside. The recording cut out. Kala's blood ran cold. Their ships, Oshen murmured, never returned. The chamber was silent. Kala clenched his fists. You're telling me the humans took control of their machines too? How? Their technology was primitive. That's what we all thought, Oshen admitted. But it wasn't about technology. It was about understanding. He leaned forward. The Gamari built walls, layers of encryption, firewalls, countermeasures. Humans didn't try to break those walls. They made the Gamari believe the walls were already gone. Kala's breath hitched. You mean, they tricked their own ships into thinking they had already been compromised? A slow, dreadful realization sank into Kala's mind. They didn't just win the war. His voice was barely a whisper. They rewrote how war is fought. Oshen gave a grim nod. That was the day the galaxy made its decision, he said. Humans could never be allowed to fight again. Kala swallowed hard. And if they ever do? Oshen met his gaze, his voice barely above a whisper. Then the war will be over before it even begins. Kala's claws tapped against the smooth surface of the table, the rhythmic sound the only noise in the council chamber. He could feel the weight of the story pressing against his mind, demanding answers that no one dared to speak. How did it end? He finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Oshen exhaled slowly, as if the memories themselves were too heavy to bear. It didn't end the way wars usually do, he said. There was no grand battle. No final stand. No peace treaty. The elder leaned forward, his glowing blue eyes scanning the room. The Gamari armada vanished. Their war efforts collapsed. But not because the humans destroyed them. Kala's mandibles twitched. Then what happened? Oshen's gaze darkened. They surrendered. A murmur swept through the council. Some of the diplomats exchanged uneasy glances. Kala frowned. Surrendered? Just like that? They didn't just surrender, Oshen corrected. They begged. The room fell into an eerie silence. Oshen activated a final holographic recording. It was old, the data nearly corrupted beyond repair, but the audio was still clear enough to send a chill through Kala's bones. A Gamari Supreme Commander was on screen, his once proud posture gone, his multiple eyes wide with terror. He was broadcasting from the heart of his empire, speaking directly to the human delegation. We yield. We submit. Whatever you desire, we shall provide. Only, please, tell us what is real. Kala's heart pounded in his chest. The Gamari, the same species that had once ruled vast swaths of the galaxy with an iron fist, were reduced to this? The transmission ended. Oshen sat back in his seat, rubbing his temples. No one ever saw the human response. Some say they didn't even answer. He sighed. There was no need to. Kala struggled to make sense of it. They surrendered without a fight. Without terms. Without resistance. Oshen nodded. Because the war wasn't fought on the battlefield. It was fought inside their minds. Kala exhaled shakily. And the humans, just let them go? Oshen's eyes darkened. No one truly knows what happened next. The Gamari sealed themselves off from the rest of the galaxy. Their empire crumbled. Their people vanished into the shadows. To this day, no one dares to approach their worlds. A shiver crawled down Kala's spine. And the humans? Oshen gave a grim smile. They went home. The young diplomat's breath caught. That's it? After everything, they just left? Oshen nodded. They didn't demand reparations. They didn't take territory. They made no effort to expand their influence. He paused. They simply walked away. Kala stared in disbelief. They could have ruled the galaxy. Kala stared in disbelief. They could have ruled the galaxy. Oshen met his gaze. That is why we fear them. The chamber was deathly silent. Kala swallowed hard. And if they ever return to war? Oshen's voice was a whisper. Then the galaxy will finally see what true war looks like. Kala felt the weight of Oshen's words settle into his bones. The idea of a species so terrifying that an entire Galactic Council had conspired to ban them from war was almost too much to comprehend. He took a slow breath. But why? Why did the humans walk away? If they were as powerful as you say, why didn't they take control of the galaxy? Oshen's expression was unreadable. Because they never wanted to. Kala frowned. That doesn't make sense. Every major civilization seeks power, expansion. That's the nature of dominance. Not for them, Oshen said. The humans never fought for conquest. They fought because they were forced to. And when it was over, they saw no reason to stay. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. To them, war was never a tool for gain. It was a necessary evil. And they despised it. The chamber remained tense. Kala shook his head. I still don't understand. If they hated war so much, how did they become so good at it? Oshen's gaze darkened. Because war is all they have ever known. The young diplomat stiffened. Oshen continued. Unlike the rest of us, humans did not evolve in harmony. They did not grow under the guidance of a singular ruling body. Their history is war. He gestured, and another holographic display came to life, this time a vast timeline of human history. Kala's eyes widened as he scanned the data. It was endless. Century after century, war after war, entire civilizations rising and falling in an unbroken cycle of conflict. This, he whispered. This can't be real. Oh, it's real, Oshen murmured. For thousands of years, humans fought themselves. They developed weapons not for survival against nature, but for survival against each other. Every step of their technological progress was driven by war. Kala's breath hitched. And yet, they survived. Not just survived, Oshen said. They thrived. They adapted. Learned. And by the time they reached the stars, they had already mastered the art of war in ways no species could comprehend. The chamber was silent. Kala stared at the timeline, his mind racing. And yet, they were the first to walk away from war when they had the chance. Oshen nodded. That is the paradox of humanity. They are the greatest warriors the galaxy has ever known, and yet, they are the only ones who truly understand the cost of war. Kala shuddered. So that's why the ban was put in place. Yes, Oshen said. Because if humans ever returned to war, there would be no war. Only the end of war. And the galaxy itself might not survive what comes next. The chamber remained silent, the truth settling over them like a shadow. And for the first time in his life, Kala understood why the law had never been broken. Kala's mind swirled with the weight of everything he had heard. The pieces of the puzzle had finally come together, and the image they formed was terrifying. The galaxy had not spared humanity from war. It had spared itself. Oshen sat in silence, watching as the realization sank into the young diplomat's mind. The chamber was deathly still. No one spoke. No one even breathed too loudly, as if saying the wrong thing might wake something long buried. Kala forced himself to speak. And no one has dared challenge this ban? Oshen's expression was unreadable. Not openly. Kala stiffened. What do you mean? The elder exhaled slowly. There have been whispers. Some factions have wondered if the stories are exaggerated. If humanity is truly as dangerous as the records claim. He paused. And some have even thought of testing the ban. Kala's breath caught. Who? Oshen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the holographic interface, bringing up classified intelligence reports. Kala's eyes widened as he scanned them. He recognized the insignias of several rising war factions, groups that had been gaining power in the outer systems, beyond the eyes of the Central Council. They're planning something, Kala murmured. Oshen nodded grimly. They believe humanity has grown soft. That they have forgotten war. They think if they strike first, they can control the narrative, contain the danger before it begins. Kala's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That's madness. It's arrogance, Oshen corrected. The same arrogance the Gamari had. He leaned forward. They don't realize what they're inviting upon themselves. A heavy silence followed. Kala swallowed hard. Then what do we do? Oshen studied him for a long moment before answering. We do nothing. Kala's pulse quickened. Nothing? Oshen nodded. The ban is clear. Humanity is to be left alone. If these factions break the law and provoke them, they will face the consequences alone. Kala could hardly believe what he was hearing. You would let them awaken the storm? Oshen's gaze darkened. We cannot stop them. They are too blind to listen. But we can prepare for what comes after. A cold realization settled into Kala's bones. You think it's already too late? Oshen exhaled. I think the moment they make their first move, the war will already be over. They just don't know it yet. The chamber remained silent, every diplomat lost in their own thoughts. And in that silence, Kala found himself staring at the holographic records of humanity, the wars, the victories, the horrors. For the first time, he felt genuine pity for those who had chosen to test them. They had no idea what was coming. The council chamber remained silent, but there was no peace in that silence. Every leader present understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. A challenge to the ban on humanity's involvement in war was not just reckless, it was suicidal. Kala shifted uneasily. If this faction truly moves forward with their attack, what will happen? Oshen's gaze was distant, as if he could already see the outcome. It will be swift, he said. It will be final. Kala exhaled sharply. You keep saying that. But how can we be certain? The humans have not fought in centuries. What if they have changed? What if they no longer remember how to fight? Oshen gave a grim chuckle. That is what they are hoping, too. He leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. But humans do not forget. They adapt. They endure. And if war calls them back, they will answer. A ripple of unease passed through the council. Kala's mind raced. Then we must warn them. No, Ocean said, shaking his head. We cannot interfere. Kala clenched his fists. So we are to do nothing while a war begins? Ocean's expression was unreadable. It will not be a war. It will be a reckoning. Kala exhaled sharply, feeling a mix of frustration and dread. And when it's over? Ocean held his gaze. When it's over, the galaxy will once again understand why this ban was put in place. The chamber remained silent. No one challenged the words. No one dared. Kala sat back, his mind swirling with the weight of everything he had learned. The truth was no longer hidden from him. The ban was not a punishment. It was not exile. It was mercy. A warning signal flashed on Ocean's console. He tapped it, bringing up a live data feed. A fleet was mobilizing, hundreds of warships moving toward human space. The faction had made its move. A single message was intercepted, a declaration of war against humanity. And then, moments later, the fleet vanished. No battle. No struggle. No distress calls. Just silence. Kala's blood ran cold. Ocean's voice was steady as he turned off the display. And so, it begins. The young diplomat swallowed hard, his mind replaying Ocean's words. If humans ever returned to war, there would be no war. Only the end of war. The chamber sat in silence, each diplomat coming to the same, horrifying realization. And somewhere, out in the darkness of space, humanity had stirred once more. A message, one single warning, was transmitted back to the galaxy. We did not seek this. But now that you have called us back, remember why you once feared us. The screen flickered off. The war was already over.